Just a few more people entering the entering the meeting. A few more people entering the meeting.
Good evening, greetings to everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's meeting. My name is Moira Samuels. I will be co-chairing the meeting tonight. I am a member of North Kensington, Stand Up to Racism, and a community campaigner for Justice for Grenfell. I'm going to begin a little bit by talking about how we're going to conduct the meeting. And we've got a fantastic array of speakers. But before that, I'd just like to say that probably like everybody else, thousands of us have been really outraged and appalled at the news of Child Q. You know, a child was searched, a child by police officers in a school, police officers called in by teachers. And I think for many of us, the details were unbelievably shocking. And so our meeting today is part of a call out, an exposure of the institutional racism, of the sexism and the homophobia in the police force, but also calls into question the role of teachers, I think, in schools and their failure to safeguard children in our schools. So each of our speakers will be speaking for 5 minutes, and there will be opportunity for everyone to raise a question. You can raise a question or say something within the chat, but also you will be called, there'll be plenty of time for you to be called to ask your question. So I'm going to hand over to our lovely host, co-host Nemo Hussein, who works with Diane Abbott. So Nemo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Moira. Thank you. As Moira said, I will be co-chairing this meeting today. My name is Nima Hussein, and I work with our first speaker, which is my greatest pleasure to introduce, and that's the Right Honourable Diane Abbott MP, the Labour Member of Parliament for Hackney North and Stoke Newington. Diane? Sorry, just 1 second. I did actually just see Diane on there. Sorry, can we just unmute Diane? She's on his iPhone. And her camera's on. Diane, sorry, you're still muted. You just unmute. No, Diane, still muted. Just press it once. Yeah, perfect.
But can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I'm really sorry for that slight technical hitch. And I'd like to congratulate everybody for being involved in this meeting tonight. As you've heard from one of the co-hosts, the Child Q case has shocked and outraged people everywhere. It's put the focus on institutional racism and misogyny in policing, but it's also spotlighted, I think, institutional racism in education. And you've got a whole range of speakers, but I just wanted to say a few things about some of the issues that I'm concerned about. First of all, when we talk about institutional racism in policing, it's worth remembering that the particular police station involved, Stoke Newington Police Station in Hackney, has a history of very serious abuse of police power. At the end of the 80s and the 90s, there were no fewer than 3 Black men that died at the hands of or in custody of Stoke Newington Police, Colin Roach, C.G. Lepiti, and Rachel Charles. And no one has ever really understood what happened to them. All we know is their death happened at the hands of the police. More recently, we've had the case of Dr. Duff, who was a law student, perfectly innocent woman. She stopped and saw the police stopping and searching a young Black man. She handed him a card saying, "Know your rights," which clearly outraged Stoke Newington Police because they took her back to the police station, strip searched her and abused her. This was someone with no criminal record. As it happens, she was a white woman. So they strip searched her and abused her. It took her 9 years to get compensation and apology from Stoke Newington Police. And you have to believe, if they did that to this woman, how many other women, both Black and white, have they strip searched in this wholly punitive way? Now, we're all waiting for the AOPC report, but my view, even at this point, is that the borough commander in Hackney, Marcus Barnett, should consider his position. I'm not saying that moving or sacking any one police officer will change institutional racism in the Metropolitan Police Force, but I do believe that police officers and senior police officers need to start paying a price for these incidents. Otherwise, nothing will change. The police have issued figures for strip searching in London for under 18s, but I think those figures almost certainly underestimate. What those figures do show is that Black children are disproportionately likely to be strip searched. But there's also an issue about institutional racism in schools. The question I've been asking from when I heard about this is, why on earth did the school call the police like that? They claim it was because they smelled cannabis smoke on the girl. But even if you seriously thought that a 15-year-old had some sort of drugs issue, shouldn't your first step be to talk to her, to get her counselling, to talk to her parents, not call the police? They call the police, and I have to say as well, private schools don't call the police on their pupils when they suspect drug use. So what on earth was the matter with those teachers? They're now saying, and maybe people in the audience know better than that, but they're now saying that they didn't know the child was strip searched, as if that makes it better. It seems to me that the school has entirely failed to exercise a duty of care. They didn't even call the parents to let them know what had happened. It was only when the child came home, a very distraught child came home, that a mother realised what had happened. And it's also worth saying, I'm sure other people will touch on this, that this happened at the end of 2020, and this child is still traumatised, still upset. I believe that she's self-harming. The police have now apologised What they've never explained to me is why they didn't apologise at the time, once the strip search had taken place. They claim they tried to apologise to her privately. They should, if they were serious about regretting what had happened, they should have apologised to her at the time. So there's the policing aspect, there's a schools aspect, and I'm interested in the schools aspect. I'm interested in what the teachers thought they were doing. I'm interested in the lack of safeguarding. I'm interested in why senior management in the school claim they didn't know there was a strip search. I've even heard people say they didn't know there were police officers in the school. In the end, there were 5 police officers involved. There was the community police officer attached to the school who was at home on COVID because he was suffering from COVID. That was the first person they ran. But in the end, 4 police officers turned up at the school. Another one was on the line, all because of a 15-year-old girl that smelt of cannabis. I mean, it's all very wrong indeed. But before I conclude my remarks, for some years, I ran a programme of conferences. They started off being called Hackney Schools and the Black Child, and they were ultimately called London Schools and the Black Child. And Ken Livingstone funded them. They touched on a number of issues: educational underachievement, exclusions, Black teachers, cultural competency amongst white teachers. So what I wanted to conclude by saying is the Child Q case is very shocking, but it also sheds light on issues that some of us have been campaigning about for some time. I think the people involved, both on the policing side and the school side, need to consider their position. And I want to organise an event which will help to focus the unhappiness and the shock and the outrage about what has happened. Thank you very much for asking me to speak.
Thank you so much, Diane. It's an absolutely informative introduction, I think, to this meeting tonight. I think many of us were aware of the response of the Hackney community and I think the whole of London. And our next speaker is Jacqueline Courtney, and she was one of the organisers of the magnificent demonstration in Hackney. She's also a campaigner. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Hi everyone, thank you for that introduction, Moira, and thank you for asking me to speak. Yes, my name is Jacqueline Courtney, and I was the lead organiser of the Solidarity Rally for Child Q that was held at Hackney Town Hall on March 20th. I did this, I've been asked why I did this. Now, I guess I'll start there, quite a lot in the last few weeks. And I did it because I was really moved into action because of how outrageous I felt it was that what happened to this child was allowed to happen. And that it took 2 years for any of us to hear a whiff about it, to me makes it even more worse. And as we all know, in that time, in those 2 years, at no point did the Met see it fit to remove the officers who strip searched the child. Instead, they waited until 3 days after the report was released to do what? To put them on desk duty and to make a very weak apology. So let's really take stock. What I'd like people to do actually is to take stock of this and really let it sink in what's happened, and let no one listening to this be in any doubt that there is indeed, as Diane has touched on, deep-seated anti-Blackness involved here. Because what we've seen happen to Child Q, in my opinion, would never have happened if she wasn't Black. And I love that the report made it clear that racism was an issue, was a factor, a likely factor. And when it comes to the case of Child Q, as I said, it's a case that is clearly a symbol, an example of racism in our schools. And we must interrogate what that means and where that belief comes from. To me, it comes from, as the report also said, adultification bias. That is not an opinion, it's a belief based on fact and feeling. It's a known phenomenon that Black boys as young as 10, for example, may not be viewed in the same way of childhood and innocence as their white peers, but instead are more likely to be mistaken as older or be perceived as guilty, more guilty, and face more harsher police violence if they're accused of a crime. And that is research that was found by the American Psychological Association. Similar study in by North Carolina State University, conducted in 2021, found that the older an adult thinks a Black child is, the more likely that adult is to incorrectly view that child as being angry. There was no similar shift in adults' perceptions of white children's emotions. Then we can look to things like Afro hair discrimination. In the workplace and in schools, many Black people have experienced discrimination of their hair. My mum, for example, in the 90s, when she worked at Central London Hospital, she was told she had mushroom hair because she had that sort of Oprah Winfrey hair press and curl style. My brother, 10 years ago, on his first day at secondary school, was put into detention because he had a short haircut that many Black boys have, that is not unusual to have on your first day of school. And that was 10 years ago. And that was the beginning of years of torment at that school that he went to, a school that is only just outside of Hackney in Islington, so fairly near to where Child Q attended school. So clearly there is a consistent problem here. When it comes to policing, we've had the same policing system for over a millennia. And I think it's time we change the way we govern diverse and new emerging communities. Police in the UK have had a very long time to fix up. Thanks to inquiries like the McPherson report, it's been widely known that there's a serious problem. But what wasn't as widely known until Child Q, in my opinion, is that our education system is also equally woeful. But we should have seen the signs. People like Professor Gus John, who's written and talked about the undereducation of Black Caribbean children for decades, has made it clear that there's been a problem in our schools. And I really thank the Stand Up to Racism UK team for putting this online event together and putting this focus on policing in our schools, because in light of Child Q, it's clear that it's time to shake things up. I'm a parent governor because I think it's important to have myself as a Black woman being there and being representative of that presence and population in the school. But we need to go further than that, I think. I think it's now time to do something drastic, do something very different. And what I mean by that is perhaps looking across the pond to America and considering whether in the UK it's time to have an education system that centers Black children and Black teachers, because we have to do something. We can't keep our children in schools that are not safe. It just doesn't make logical sense to keep telling very young minds and young souls that, you're going to go to school and you're going to be treated in these ways, but that's fine. We'll just carry on letting you go into mainstream schooling. That's not safe. It's not safe for them now, and it's not going to be safe for them in the future. Many Black people who have gone through that system are still healing from it years and decades afterwards. For what? To what end? It only puts our economy to detriment, because now you have a cohort of people who aren't able to fulfill their true purpose and potential in life, and aren't able to give back and be part of the GDP and the economy through work and their labour. So I think it's time that we think about having predominantly Black schools. And I'm not going to be afraid to say that. And I think anyone who agrees with me should also be equally unapologetic about it. And that's what I wanted to say today. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very, very much, Jacqueline. And thank you for your work in organising that brilliant solidarity rally at Hackney Town Hall a couple of Sundays ago. Our next speaker is Patrick Vernon, the author and political activist. Welcome, Patrick.
Hi there. So it's thanks everyone, and great to have a lot of people, and thanks for Stand Up to Racism, Diane, and the team for organising this. Like with Jacqueline, I worked with Jacqueline and Million Women Rise to organise the vigil and demonstration. About 3,000, despite what you read in the media, there were about 3,000 people outside Hackney Town Hall. We had numerous speakers, majority were women, and what was interesting, a number of young girls from a number of schools in Hackney spoke out about how they felt about their peer and their own experiences of discrimination in schools. I support Diane's idea of a Black Child Conference and Parenting Conference. I can remember the very first conference that Diane organised nearly 20 years ago in Hackney. I was actually did a workshop on Black history. Don't know if you remember that, Diane. And it built from strength to strength. It's only when Boris Johnson pulled the plug, he didn't support it. There's a need for that conference again. And the reason why I think Diane organised that conference 20 years ago, things haven't changed that fundamentally. And it was at a time when Hackney had the worst GCSE results in London, particularly for Black boys. That was pre-academy. We've got the highest number of academies in London as a borough. And although a lot of parents wanted academies, the current schools were failing. What's quite clear from the academisation process is a lack of transparency, a lack of scrutiny, and lack of accountability. And that is why Child Q was let down by that school because of that. And then on top of that, with the police. And it wasn't for the fact that Hackney Council forced the hand of the police and the school that we had an independent report. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known about Child Q. There were rumours about a young girl couple of years ago, but if you can remember, under lockdown we were isolated, we were not even communicating with people, so you could argue this was kind of almost like suppressed quite conveniently. Now we know the whole truth. One of the things that I want to focus on is why was it that the parents weren't told about circumstances or what was happened to their daughter? I've been an appropriate adult, and I've done police station visits where I get a phone call from the police before they can interview anyone under the age of 16. There has to be present a parent, guardian, or appropriate adult. So I've been an appropriate adult. And what's quite clear from the experiences of what's happened to Child Q and other Child Qs around the country, because I think there needs to be an independent public inquiry on this whole situation. How many more Black girls have gone through a similar experience, suffering in silence as Child Q? I think there should be a rights card for every single Black child in schools in Britain, so they know their rights. So if they're in that situation where they're going to be potentially strip searched or other things happening to them, they can say, hold up, I have rights too. I want to contact my parents or guardian or whoever. This is really important because I think the way that the educational system is forcing young people to work in a particular way, and there are some good schools, by the way, I have to say that there are some fantastic schools doing some good work, but if we can empower our young people about their rights. It's really sad that we have to do this. It's no different when they are stopped by the police in the public highway. The public highway is the school. The new front line now is not Ralton Road or down in Hackney or St. Paul's. It's in the schools. The most horrific experience I've heard, the more traumatizing experience I've heard are young people in schools. We need to have greater accountability. So I support any initiative that has greater accountability. The head teacher needs to go. The command of Hackney and Islington Police Station needs to go. As Diane says, yes, that removal of one officer or senior officer will not make a difference, but it's about accountability. For all I know, if there's a white middle class young girl living in Stoke Newington, this will not happen to her, but it's happened with Child Q, and we need to take a stand. We need to have a public demonstration, a national demonstration, because I believe there are many Child Qs as well. So I just want to thank everyone for support tonight. We need to have change. This is our George Floyd moment, everyone. We need to take responsibility, all of us, in whatever way capacity that we can do, to make sure there's proper justice for Child Q and other Child Qs, and this will never, never, never happen again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I think you're absolutely right that this is our George Floyd moment and that we need some action. There's a comment in the chat that says that from somebody NH who says, Natalie Holder, who says Hackney education is in dire mess due to capitalism. These academies have been unaccountable for over a decade. We have school to prison pipelines running from these Hackney academies, and that innocent Black boys have been convicted from these academies. Our next speaker I'd like to welcome is Wolf Sullivan, who is the TUC's Race Equality Officer. Welcome, Wolf. You need to unmute, Wolf.
Right, yeah, thanks everybody. I would like to thank Stand Up to Racism for organising this meeting tonight. You know, like Patrick, I think Q is the tip of the iceberg. It's the one that we found out about, and I think we need to put this in a wider context, because in 1971, Vernon wrote his book, How the West Indian Child Was Made Educational Subnormal by the British School System. And the heart of that book was the pathologizing of our youth. And that hasn't gone away. You know, black young children are regarded as criminals, gangsters, likely to be taking drugs. And that is a stereotype that is peddled by the national press daily. And that has an effect on the whole system. Secondly, we've constantly had over the last 30 years governments that's tried to minimise and kick off the agenda the fact that there's a problem of racism in our education system. For a number of years, as a community, we fought to get special funding to try and address the educational disparities that were taking place because of racism in schools. But that money got taken away. And what we saw, I know, especially in Hackney, was a massive increase as soon as that money got taken away in school exclusions and outcomes for young people. So we got to, as people have said, get this issue about racism in our education system back onto the agenda. But it's closely linked to the issue of stop and search, and we see those two coming together. Because actually that pathologization of young people in our community happens on the streets every day, not only in our schools, in terms of stop and search, and has continued to be. And actually the government are not interested in doing anything about it. I note from their response to the Saul report that they said in there that it's fine if there's disparities in the levels of stop and search, right? All we need to do is come up with an excuse as why those disparities exist. So ultimately what we're talking about is just not racism. We're talking about state violence towards our children and the way that institutional racism happens in our country. Because quite frankly, this is a very clear human rights abuse. And like Patrick says, it is our child, it is our moment. I mean, and the last thing I will want to say is that actually, in terms of what happened in the school, it follows a pattern of the way that authoritarianism and policing and of our communities is being rolled out. Whether it's to do with our children in schools, whether it's to do with migrant workers or asylum seekers, whether it's to do with the way that the system made people homeless and took away their jobs in terms of the Windrush generation. What we see is increasingly people that are working in public service jobs being told that what their job is to do, right, is to make sure that actually they keep our communities in check. And enough is enough. We have to, as people say, organise ourselves to start fighting back, to start making the changes that need to happen in order for our children to have a fair chance. I spent about 20 years once working with young people. I ran a children's home at one stage, and I worked with young offenders in Tottenham for 10 years. And though that was over 25 years ago, I've got absolutely no doubt that what I saw then and had to deal with and advocate in terms of young people being fitted up, the strip searches, the absolute oppression of black young people in our communities, nothing has changed. because I find myself when I'm walking around the streets of Tottenham every now and again having to intervene in those situations. So yes, we need to equip our children to know their rights. But actually, it's not about them just knowing their rights and having to work on an individual basis. We have to come together as a community to protect them, because if we don't protect them, nobody else will.
Thank you very much, Wolf, and that's absolutely right. We do absolutely have to organise ourselves and fight back. Our next speaker is Christelle, musician and rapper, here to join us. Welcome, Christelle.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me, yeah?
Yep.
First, I'd like to say, obviously, thank you for letting me speak on this topic. It's been hard to see it circulating on social media. The first time I saw it was on Twitter. And when I first saw the dates, I was like, hold on a minute. This happened 2 years ago. Why am I only reading about it now on Twitter 2 years down the line? And it wasn't first brought to my attention by the news. That was the first thing that was a bit like, I was like, what's going on? But the whole issue, it's not only about Child Q being black. It's about her being black. It's about her being young. And it's about her being a female. Do you get what I'm trying to say? I'm about to be 21 years old. I was once 14, 15 in school. There was a lot going on. When I was in school, I had an altercation with someone that was supposed to be a person of power. There was this kids company. Apparently they're the most corrupt guidance counselors for kids or whatever not. But I had kids company people in my school. And as far as I knew, they were supposed to be the guidance counselors for the kids in secondary school and whatever not. One day I was like playing with my friend Kaylee, and obviously I'm the black girl, so I must be the bully or whatever not. She's smaller than me. We're literally playing with each other, laughing and joking. But because she's smaller than me, the kids company teacher thought that I was bullying her, bursted out the classroom and started punching me in my head and was like, how do you like it? How do you like it? And I didn't know what to do. I was genuinely in shock. I was like in year 7 or year 8. But after that, the teacher took the right action, as in like the teacher that was the head of Key Stage 3, and called my mum to come down the street to the school like immediately. And now that woman can't work with kids again. So for me, hearing what's happened to Child Q is just, I'm shocked. Because for me to be in school and it's been dealt with properly, this person can't work with children again. Why is it that police officers involved now, nothing is happening? Nothing's being done about it. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Like, this is not only going to be hard, or it's not only been hard for Child Q to understand herself as a youth or as a black person. She's not only been targeted as a youth or a black person, she's been targeted as a woman. So for her to wake up every day and have to see herself in the mirror when she goes to wash her face or brush her teeth or put on her clothes and just feel like she might feel disgusting. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it's borderline. I don't want to misspeak or nothing like, but it's borderline rape. It's borderline sexual assault, because a strip search isn't just looking. They're not just looking. They don't just strip you naked and look. They feel your body. And for her to be at the tender age of 14, 15, where she's just figuring out her body and she's menstruating and all these things that she might barely even understand the whole thing, what goes on with that time of the month. She's only just figuring it out. And the police officers have come in and they've taken that aspect of innocence away from her. She can't even figure herself out anymore. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So for me, I just genuinely feel like the whole thing about targeting young black kids, it comes from the age limits and the age restrictions that people put on things. Like, I know 14-year-olds, I've seen 14-year-olds that walk up and down the street smoking that stupid vape pen. Do you get what I'm trying to say? From when you can see a 14-year-old child walking up and down smoking a vape pen, it's easy for a police officer to run them down the street and beat them up and strip search them and leave them bloody on the floor and be that, I thought it was a spliff. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So I just genuinely feel like there's a lot of speculation about a lot of different things going on and none of it's correct. When I was in school, when I turned 16 doing my GCSEs, the teachers fed us information about the minimum age for kids to have sex now got brought down to 14. So before this meeting, I went and researched it and I saw on Google it says it's 16. But on another website that's speaking about rape and these things, it says it's 13. So if a lot of these things, if they're giving you 3 different ages for kids to be sexually active on their own or to do things for themselves, the people that are in power that misuse their power and it's a misconduct of power and all of these things, they can just say, but I thought it was this, but it's not that. So yeah, I don't know. And the whole thing about Black schools and having a school for Black children and whatever, not, I agree. But then again, I don't, because I've been one of the Black children that's been isolated and done anger management and all these things that they put the Black kids in school, and all it does is draw unnecessary attention. So yeah, thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much, Christelle, because you certainly raise a number of issues around that I think are quite shocking for a lot of us thinking about her as a young woman and adolescence, and about who do we consider, how do we look after our when are children, and when do they stop being children, and when are they treated as competent adults. Our next speaker, before I introduce, I'd like to just remind everybody there are over 342 people on this on this call at this meeting. Feel free to share, but also if people want to ask questions or make a contribution after our speakers, you can put your hand up now. It's in the reactions button. Use the reaction button at the bottom of your screen. I'd like to welcome Chantal Lunt from Merseyside Black Lives Matter. Welcome, Chantal.
Hi, thank you, Moira. Thank you for inviting me to speak Stand Up to Racism. Firstly, I just want to say to Christelle, thank you for sharing your experiences. I know how hard it can be sharing your experiences, but it's important that young people are telling us what they are going through, especially young Black women at the hands of the police. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chantal Lunt, and I'm a former police officer who reported members of my team for racism and misogyny. The report was so serious that it was filed as a hate crime against me, but nothing happened to the officers involved. And a report's come out this week saying that 2/3 of reports of racism against Met officers, the officers, no actions taken against them, and they continue to serve. And I spend most of my time, I'm the founder of Merseyside BLM Alliance, and I spend most of my time really scrutinising the police. I study criminology. I'm finishing my master's degree in criminology and social policy, and I've made it my mission to educate myself on everything I can about the police and study them. And Child Q was heartbreaking, but Child Q really woke us up to, it's not just the police. This was a collusion between the police and the schools. And what I am thinking about is, in policing, you're always told about this, it was the reasonable man test and it was the reasonable person test. And it's all about what would a reasonable person do in this situation. And for me, I think schools and the police should always be running this reasonable parent test in their head. What would a reasonable parent do? Would a reasonable parent phone the police if they smelt weed on their kid? Would a reasonable parent had strip search a child? No, they would not. And if you would not do it to your own child, then do not do it to ours. And we need to consider this proportionality of policing. That strip search was illegal, it was disproportionate, there should have been an adult there, she shouldn't have been searched. As an officer on the street, like if you search someone who smells of cannabis and you can't find cannabis, they're not brought back to the station as strip search, they just go on the way. It's completely disproportionate. And we have to be asking, what is the function of the police? We need to be challenging these notions that we are ever treated fairly, and be considering, and I'm going to give you a bit of history here, that the police are part of the colonial legacy. A lot of officers who were in the colonies, policing the colonies, came back to London and policed in the Met. They were founded in 1829 by Sir Robert Peel, less than 200 years ago. They are a social experiment. And I'm going to tell you about an academic called Eduardo Bonilla Silva. He described the police as agents of racial control. And that's probably one of the most accurate descriptions I've ever come across. And when we talk about, nothing's changed, how can anything change when we have a racist Tory government in power who are happy to look the other way, encourage a racist rhetoric, and never hold the police to account? But let's look at some of the principles that the police are formed in. Robert Peel's 9 Peelian principles. I'm not going to tell you them all, but 2 of them really stick out to me at this moment. To recognise always that the power of the police to fulfil their function and duties is dependent on public approval of their existence, actions and behaviours, and their ability to secure and maintain public respect. That's number 2. Number 9, to recognise always that the test of police efficiency is the absence of crime and disorder and not the visible evidence of police in action in dealing with them. Now, if you go through every single Peelian principles that the police were founded upon, they are failing, every single one of it. And these principles exist to this day. This is what they hold themselves up by. They are failing, every single one of them. But there's this central notion that we are policed by consent, that we, the public, consent to the way we are policed. Have we ever been asked? Have we ever been asked, do we consent? Because I know myself, women, LGBTQ plus communities, a lot of communities, no, we do not consent. And as Diane Abbott has said, we've been talking about this for years. And I know, I've read reports, other officers, Carol Howard, Kevin Maxwell, people have come before us saying the same thing again. And they always say, oh, show us the racism. I'm not even getting into that conversation. You know where it is. You have enough reports, you have enough accounts, you know what is happening. Now is the time for action. Like if we look at Black Lives Matter, Austin, Texas diverted £20 million in funding from the police to the public health services, and they've had incredible results. We need to acknowledge that our police service is broken and be looking to actions to fix this. And this is something, I know I've got 30 seconds, that over the past few weeks I've been reaching out to organisations, Black leaders, academics and former officers and chief officers in the Black Police Association who recognise that the police are racist. And we've been looking at actions to actually get a new model in place that serves our community. All I'll say now is, because I'm out of time, follow my social media, BLM social media. I'll put a few statistics in the chat and a few links, but follow us for updates on that.
Thank you so much, Chantal. And thank you for the reminder that, the different elements of the state do collude together in these ways. Okay, so our next speaker is Kevin Courtney, the NEU Joint General Secretary. Kevin?
Thank you very much, Nina. Like has just been said, I'm General Secretary of the National Education Union, which is the biggest union organising teachers and support staff in this country. And I'm outraged by what's happened to Child Q. I'm very pleased to be here tonight and to be listening tonight. And I want to send mine and my union's solidarity to Child Q and her family, and solidarity to all those campaigning to make sure this never happens again. My union's conference is next week. It's going to discuss an emergency motion about Child Q, as well as launching an anti-racist framework for schools that we've trained 2,000 people on. What has happened to Child Q should not have happened. It should never happen again. And I want to make 3 brief points. There has to be a real distinction between what teachers do and what the police do. We need change in the police and we need change in schools. When I started teaching in 1983, I was a secondary teacher in Camden. And as a young teacher and a form tutor, there was a suspicion that one of the girls in my form was stealing from teachers' desks. The police were in school and they asked me to leave some coins marked with a fluorescent dye on my desk or in my bag. Then they said the dye would show up on her hands. They'd have proof that she was stealing. I thought that was entrapment. I thought it would break trust between me and my pupils. I thought it was disgraceful. I refused to do it. I took it to my school union group, who strongly agreed with me. Then we took the issue to the whole staff meeting and the idea was abandoned. But we have to see there is a profound difference between the role of educators and the role of police. And teachers and educators have to try and build relationships of trust with pupils and their parents. And that trust is now sorely tested by what's happened. We all have to recognize that the Howard League for Penal Reform tells us that when young people are in contact with the justice system, they see the police as not caring about them. So what's happened here must never happen again. We need much better awareness of these issues. We need much better protocols about the issues of whenever the police might be in school. We need change in the police. I've lived in Hackney for 35 years. Both my children were born in the Homerton Hospital in Hackney. They both went to Hackney primary schools and Hackney secondary schools. If my daughter had been strip searched at age 15 or 8 or any age, I would have been so angry. Strip searched without a trusted adult present, strip searched without me or her mum being told, I would have been so angry, but it wouldn't have happened to my daughter because this is so racialized. The year before the strip search of Child Q, in 2019, the Inspectorate of the Constabulary rebuked the Met Police for their higher than normal use of strip searches, which the inspectors said included many children and a significantly higher proportion of Black and minority ethnic detainees. That was the year before the strip search of Child Q. So we all have a right to ask, where are the changes that the Metropolitan Police should have brought in after that we needed those changes then. We need them now to make sure this never happens again. And we do need change in our schools. I think that we need to understand we need to return to a more child-centered form of education. What's happened here doesn't start with the strip search. It starts with zero tolerance behavior policies, a system with disproportionate exclusions of Black children, disproportionate off-rolling of Black children. There's an absence of democratic accountability in our academized school system. It's remote sometimes from the community. And underlying it all for a lot of the members I represent, the sense that issues of race are dangerous and difficult. And to respond to them fully and critically might get you into trouble. Now, we do need schools with good discipline so that all children learn, but not zero tolerance behavior systems that look at questions of Afro haircuts and say that you can't be in that, you can't have those haircuts in school. We need schools where teachers and parents talk together to act in the best interest of children. We need more Black staff in our schools. We need more Black people in senior leadership in our schools. We need more space and more permission for a consciously anti-racist curriculum. There are lots of ideas about how to do this, and I would very much like to be part of the discussion about how we do it.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm glad you reminded us that we need both change in the police and change in schools. And I think if you look at the chat, that's certainly what the demand is. Can I also remind people that you can raise any questions or comments that you have after all our speakers. You don't have to put your question in the chat. I'd like to welcome our next speaker, Corey Johnson, who is the CEO of Defender Records.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you for having me. Thank you firstly to everybody else that has spoken so far. Some really great points raised, especially to the last gentleman as well, just highlighting some of the issues. But for those that know me, especially Wayman, he's known me for many years, I'm not really one to focus on the problems. I'm all about the solutions. Because Kumbaya, we need to stop singing it. We've been singing Kumbaya for way too long now. For me, I've been not only the product of my environment, I've been one of the ones that are fortunate that I am every statistic, from a single parent home, being in the prison system, being through the gang life, and being the aggressor as well as the victim. And unfortunately, on my side, I'm now the CEO of 5 companies, and I've spent the last 4 years working with different professionals, including the YMCA, members from the police, different youth and gang projects, for us to find a holistic way of us working with not only reshaping how the community works with young people, but how young people then are able to engage with the police. The first problem for us, sorry, not in any way to offend anybody.
I think we've lost you, Corey. You still there? Corey. You seem to have, I think he may be having some technical problems, so maybe we need to move on to the next speaker, and perhaps we can take Corey after he sorts out. Corey, are you there, or are you sorting out your technical issues? Oh, no. Okay. We'll ask Corey to come back after our next speaker. Nemo, over to you.
Hi, yes, thank you, Moira. Our next speaker is Lester Holloway, from The Voice, which is Britain's only national Black newspaper. And The Voice is actually leading a campaign at the moment to get police out of schools in the wake of the incident, the strip search of child Q. Lester, welcome.
Thank you very much, and very sorry that Corey got chopped off there when he did, because he was making a very, very important point. First of all, I'd like to thank Stand Up to Racism and Diane Abbott for putting this event on. And others have touched on this already, but the key issue is the way in which the Child Q case once again proves that institutional racism, the two words that dare not speak its name as far as ministers and Tony Sewell is concerned, that institutional racism is alive and kicking and needs to be fought. And the sad reality is that Child Q is not an isolated case. As we've heard from other speakers, it's not isolated as far as strip searches on children are concerned. It's not isolated when it comes to the unnecessary negative interactions young people have with police. It's not isolated in relation to the disproportionately negative experiences that Black women have in the criminal justice system, with Black women less likely to see justice when they are the victims of sexual or domestic abuse. Not isolated as far as racism in the education system is concerned, and not isolated when you look at the historical context of misogyny and how that relates to the adultification Child Q suffered. And Child Q, I think, was just the latest in a long line of Black women and girls on the rough end of justice, from Joy Gardner, who was bound up with tape by immigration officers, to Sarah Reid, to Beaver Henry, and Nicole Smallman. And while The Voice newspaper joins with other campaigners in saying police out of our schools to combat the militarization we see with the cops patrolling school corridors, metal detectors at entrances, and a whole host of other things that send a message to young Black people that they are seen as a threat to society. But not only do we need to say police out of our schools, but we need system change to deal with the systemic racism that cuts across schools, the police, the criminal justice system, the immigration system, and ultimately the world of work. So yes, police out of our schools, but system change in our schools to tackle the problem of Black teachers feeling so undervalued that they are leaving in their droves, and system change in police so that the next Met Police Commissioner to replace the unlamented Cressida Dick are operating in a better police culture where they can find better things to do with their time than just traumatize young Black kids with non-existent possession of cannabis searches. And a police service, that fights crime rather than a police force that harasses innocent Black youth who are racially profiled on our streets. And I think it's really important that we talk about a police service that's trained to help people in crisis, that's properly integrated with specialist help for mental health and housing, rather than seeing everything as a crime or treating crimes that or basically creating crimes that don't exist until they turn up. And I'll just end with this, that, I think, we're clear about the demands we want from government to acknowledge institutional racism and then to tackle institutional racism. But I think that there are also demands on the Labour Party as well, that, they talk about wanting to bring in a race equality law, but this shouldn't be a blank sheet of paper. I think that we should be contributing as a community to what's in it, to making sure that what's being proposed is genuinely going to transform society into an anti-racist society, and that is genuinely going to take on the private sector that racially discriminates against Black workers even more than the public sector, and it's going to stop our school academies indulging in the mass exclusion of Black children and not being accountable for it. And I want to see a law that has penalties, real penalties for institutions that continue to perpetrate racial injustice on their staff, on customers, and on the general public. So I want to thank the organisers for bringing this important gathering together at the right time, I think, to keep this momentum going. Solidarity.
Thank you so much, Lester. Can I remind people that actually, if you do want to ask a question, please raise your hand. If you do want to be asked, we need you to rename yourself rather than be named iPhone or Galaxy or one of those. I'm pleased to say that we have Corey back, and I think he sorted out his technical issues. Welcome back, Corey.
Thank you, thank you. Apologies, I'm not sure what happened there. It was just a short point that I was raising, and as I was, the point I was just first getting to is that throughout all of the points that have been raised by the different speakers, and some really great ones, the first issue for me is that we need to look as a community at our community for help. There's a lot of the time we're focusing on what everybody else is doing for us, but not what are we doing for ourselves. And me personally, as a Black businessman growing up in this country, my hardest fight has actually been Black people. So us culturally need to get past the slave mentality, as well as then working together, because there's organizations out here that have the solutions. There's people out here that are doing the work. We need to stop reinventing or trying to reinvent the wheel and look at that wheel is already round. It's what spokes do you want on it. We always have organizations or focus groups or forums that want to go into communities that already have the solutions, but don't have the funding and resources, and spend another 2-3 years trying to figure out what's already been figured out. We know the problems within the police, and we know the systematic problems that are there, but the community-led initiatives and the community-led problems that we need to address, those are the first things we need, because we can look at other people coming in and policing our communities, or other people coming in and saying what we should need. But realistically, we need to speak to those communities and speak to those people that are in place. For the last 4, maybe 5 years, I've spent more than £1 million investing in our community. So when I speak, I'm not speaking from a place of an employee. I'm speaking from a place of an employer, somebody that then puts his money where his mouth is. And if I believe that there's an opportunity or there's a young person or a business, then I'll look at what are the resources that they need. And even if I don't have the resources myself, sometimes it's just about signposting them to the right place. So over the last few years, I've worked with the YMCA, with organizations that are grassroots based, with whether they're working with gangs, working with criminal and sexual exploitation, working in and around financial and political literacy, just to build a way of everybody working together and not just taking ideas and trying to then recreate what's already working, but working with those organizations and helping them upscale great and reliable services, taking those great and reliable services borough to borough, because we need one way of working. So it's not about us working and then against the police or us working against each other. It's about us as a community understanding that before racism is our biggest issue, this has now become classism. This is about poor communities that are facing the same problems, whether you're Black or you're white. And this is about us as a community, and especially as a Black community, working together in a holistic way. Because all of these different pockets of ideas, and then when somebody else starts to grow, they tend to fight against each other. There has to be a way of us working together. And I feel Safe Zones and the organizations that have built that initiative, I feel that they have that route. So for me personally, I would like to see everyone come together to work with something that's been developed rather than starting from the beginning again. Or it'll be another 2 or 3 years before we're looking at what the situation is. And then there's been another 100 or thousands of situations since then. So humbly grateful for the time. And I'll be sending an email out to Wayman, because like I said, I'm about the actions and solutions, because we can all focus on the problems, but what are we going to do? We have an idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Corey. Thank you. Our next speaker is Wayman Bennett, co-convener of Stand Up to Racism. Wayman?
Look, you know, it's been brilliant what people have said here. I want to thank all the speakers for their contribution here, because I think it's been urgent. I want to say that I do think that when we're talking about racism inside Hackney and the Hackneys and from the police, I think we should look at the question about how they're behaving generally overall. Think about the MP, David Warburton, who took line after line of cocaine. Did they kick his door down and strip search him, even though the evidence is there? Think about what's happened over the question of the lockdown, where they put all those stringent controls on us. And they've had an inquiry, 2 inquiries, I think, led by senior officers into the government, into Boris Johnson himself, about whether they broke the law. It's very, very clear that they broke the law, but they sent them questionnaires. If that had been any of us, then they'd have treated us completely differently. Think about that and compare how they treated Child Q. And that tells you why there's something fundamentally wrong. We don't want this meeting to be just a talking shop, to be honest. I want to go back to what Diane said at the beginning. How many times have we been here? Windrush campaign, Grenfell, I could go on. You know, the murders that have taken place. This meeting is about organisation. And one of the calls that have come out that Diane said right at the beginning is that we want that conference to be about education as well. And I want to raise a question about, we were asked about, should we have it only in Black schools? To be honest with you, I think we need the history of Black education for all schools. That's the truth of it, because the reality is, for start, that is the history of Britain, actually. It's a black and white history in which, to be honest, Black generals have led for major changes. Part of the reason why we've got a trade union movement. I'm very proud that the trade union movement, the teachers' union, played a significant role in supporting a call for justice to take place. But I want to reiterate the demands, and I don't think we should do it. All the 4 officers involved in what took place, we want them sacked. You know, at the end of this day, whatever it is, we want outcomes of why we're meeting here. One of the things is, the reason why I want them sacked is the same reason why the murder of George Floyd was finally brought to justice. If there is no action, what is a real lesson learned? The real lesson learned is that, you know, we have this inquiry, like when we did the Macpherson inquiry, and we carry on doing exactly the same thing. And there's a level of, there's not going to be a question of those things. The second thing is a question of resources. The reason why we want less money being put into things like policing. I mean, I think it's amazing that when there's a war, there's unlimited amount of money. Suddenly they can find all the money they need to give to people. We're asking for a fraction of that to be put into all our schools. And so some of the outcomes that we want is that when we have that conference, I also want to salute the students that walked out of their school, you know, both in City in Islington and in many of the other places, because I think that unless we come together with all the different organisations, with the trade unions, with all the movements that take place, what we're fighting for is a question of what happened over black and white education. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the speaker from Trojan Horse here because it's Ramadan, and we want to salute our brothers and sisters that are who are celebrating Ramadan. But one of the things is our enemy is the same. It was Gove that brought in the whole question of prevent. It is Gove that brought in some of the questions of bringing in more policing inside schools. And by the way, he said that he sniffed on cocaine on 20 occasions. He wasn't strip searched. He was given a more senior job inside government. So don't tell me it's about crime. Don't tell me it's about drugs. It's about something, it's about deep, systematic, institutional racism. But I do want to say to us sisters and brothers that the final warning to us is when they do that to children. A society is judged by how you treat the weakest in our society. And if you do that to a child, it's happened to my child. It's happened to my child. It was strip searched on the street as a young boy. He was with other people. Happened in Hackney. It happened to my brothers, I think, are on this call. There were much more out there what happened to them. But we do have to say enough is enough. This is the final warning for us. And so really what I want to do is to say, let's have the conference, but let's have some action come out of this. Let's use the energy of all the people that are together to make sure that we make sure there's a change. We want to decolonize our education system. It's not just a demand, we have to turn that into an activity, and we're going to have to fight for it. I think we're going to have to fight for it because the direction of the government is more heavier policing, more attacks on asylum seekers and refugees, and actually denigrating the very people that made a difference. I'll end up with this. My mother came here as a nurse. She saved thousands of lives as a nurse that she came from Jamaica. How was that generation treated? Look what happened with the Windrush campaign. They admitted what the government did was criminal. And then afterwards, they've not done anything about it. I think that when they start treating children like this, black and white, young and old, gay and straight, wherever you're from, you have to come together and say that we want to make sure there's a difference. And I think it's important that we understand Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, all those things have to be brought together. That's what that conference is about. It's about empowering parents and young people and the trade unions to say enough is enough. So please join us in the conference, but please, let's organize together and make sure there's a real change. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so very much, Wayman. We're now going to move to some comments from the floor. I just want to remind you, so each speaker will have 2 minutes, and there is an automatic mute in place just so that we can keep to time. Our first person I'd like to invite to speak, Kim 2016. There's a hand up.
Hello.
Hi, Kim. Hiya, we can hear you.
Oh, hi. I just want to let people know that racism in the police is real. I too was let down by a safeguarding officer who reported a 4-year-old child to the social services. And it wasn't enough for her that she reported this child and have the child removed from the mother. She called the police and said that she was being harassed by this mother. The police did not ask for any evidence or anything to support her claim. They went to this mother and arrested this woman aggressively. 7 male officers arrested this woman. That poor woman had to have back surgery because of this. Now, that's not enough for her and for the police. She's after the mother again. After you deal with the police like this, 7 men arresting a woman, damaging her back, she wants the woman to have to go to jail because they realized that she's been doing this to Black children in that primary school. Now, these are 4-year-olds, these are 6-year-olds, and she is allowed to discriminate these children, and she's being helped by the police. So it's not just that child Q, it's a lot of other children, a lot of other Black children that are suffering. And this is the problem with this country. It's a lot of discrimination and a lot of police who are doing a lot of wrong things. And this woman is being helped, as I said, by the police. When does it stop? Why does this poor mother have to prove that she's innocent? If I had done that to you, it would have been a totally different story. She was not charged for wasting police time. So it just goes to show that there is racism in the police. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kim, and thank you for that reminder that it's not the incident with child Q is not an isolated incident. Can I call Dean Ryan to speak? Sorry, Dean, you're muted. You're still, there you are. Sorry, Dean, it says unmuted, but we can't hear you. Or I can't hear you. No. Okay, can we come back to you? That's okay? Could we have Ebony Kingston, please?
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to just quickly comment about child Q. When you take into consideration what happened, this could have been George Floyd all over again. Okay, that's number one. Number two, you know, as people have said, that these police officers should be sacked. They spent 15 months after the event patrolling the streets, so we don't know what other mishaps that if you want to call it a mishap, we don't know what else they've been up to with regards to you know, other children, and also you know, this thing about adultification of young Black children. Apparently, you know, it's only Black children that can actually look older than they actually are. And this is, and bearing in mind that this child was in uniform. So that should give an indication that, you know, the child is under 18 and is still at school. And the fact that they took her out of an exam to strip search her, and to, you know, to even go as far as getting her to spread her backside cheeks to find nothing is borderline child abuse, is borderline rape. It could have ended up in murder. That's all I've got to say for now.
Thank you, Ebony. Dean, are you able to come back in? And then Dean will be followed by Highgate's Black Woman. Can't hear you, Dean. Sorry, I don't know. I think you're having some technical. Highgate's Black Woman, if you can raise your question, and then that will be followed by Dean. Or Dean, you're going to try with your headphones on.
Can you hear me now?
Brilliant, we can.
Brilliant. All right, thank you. All right, sorry about that, guys. All right, I want to pick up on the point that people raised about black schools, because I understand the sentiment of that. But what I need to say is that actually we need to remember that black people work and contribute to this country. We pay taxes as a whole, and we shouldn't let this racist government and a racist police force marginalise us and try and build things from scratch. Actually, you know, as Wayman said, I think we need to make sure that black education and black history and black achievement is not just taught to black kids, it's taught to everyone, you know, and I think we need to fight for an anti-racist curriculum. And I think when we saw that Wayne Couzens, a serving policeman, murdered a woman, you know, actually the scales have been removed from a lot of people's eyes in society, you know. Actually, women can now see that the police are misogynistic. The gay community, you know, the LGBT plus community can see that the police are you know, are homophobic to the core. And I think actually we can make common cause now, and actually society as a whole wants to reject the police. Now, mistrust, and survey after survey is showing that mistrust in the police force is really, really strong. People talk about the Peru to prison pipeline. Actually, I work in education, and I started working in Perus, and I now work with young offenders. And actually, the child queue situation is at the tip of the iceberg. There's disproportionality in the way young black people are treated right throughout the justice system. And I think that actually the Stand Up to Racism should put in freedom of information requests for all of the police services and forces across the land to find out how this affects black people. Because actually, in the sentencing, the courts as well, I also think that we need to have a day of action where we actually have a day justice for the child queue, where we have demonstrations across every major city in London, and actually build local networks to demand justice for black kids. Because actually, you know, that will help us to fight the system. And actually, I think we really need to involve young people. You know, before the schools break up and stuff, we need to involve young people. They're the ones who have been stopped and searched. They're the ones who are having the stuff done. And actually, we need to say that actually this government and this system is not fit for purpose. You know, we need to fight to change the whole bottom system. And I'll leave it there. But actually, the way we need to do it is from the bottom up. And actually, we can't just let this government think that they can marginalise us. We need to make sure that actually we have a very visible, very large campaign on the streets and make sure that actually our voices are heard and actually our children feel safe.
Thank you, Dean. Highgate. Do you want to unmute?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Zia, and I'm founder of the Highgate Black Women's Wellness Group. It was created since the unfortunate passing of a Black mother at my school. And I think a lot of people have not touched on the part that, you know, the misogynoir, which is a term invented by Black women, by the way, in America, but it seems to have been hijacked by everybody, including white women. But the actual term is anti-Blackness against Black women, a term invented by Moya Bailey, if you guys would actually look that up. So misogynoir is a big problem. It's anti-Blackness, and we've had this going on for a good decade now. It's been worse ever since the Tories, and just historically Black women, basically what's happened since the Tories have been in power is that they've been erased. They have been erased. We have this horrible, disgusting term called BME, which made them disappear, which has now been rest in peace by the government, which is great. Now the term BME doesn't exist, as well as, you know, Black men always being promoted and issues against Black boys, but Black girls have been totally neglected. This is the first time that an issue concerning a Black girl has ever reached the press, because Black women in the UK do not make the press unless it's something very, very big like Breonna Taylor. And again, you know, ever since the Black Lives Matter protest, that finally reached the news a good like 2 months later. So the problem is the disrespect against Black women, Black female girls, and we see this evident in Child Q. So it's not surprising. And my group tries to empower Black women. We do events once a week in Houston, and we just need to start empowering Black women and Black girls. They are the future. Africa is going to be a very, very powerful continent, and the leaders of Africa will be Black women. So it is in their interest to empower Black girls. And I just think that Black women need to start speaking up, Black mothers particularly, because they've had their voices, you know, not heard for the past decade. They've been under constant attack, like the other lady that's been, you know, that has had police literally assault her and get away with it. We know about the case of Sarah Reid, the ongoing misogyny. If anybody would like to go on Lipstick Alley, African Americans are calling the UK the most hostile place for Black women. In fact, a couple of African American women are suffering from PTSD from visiting the UK and how they've been treated as Black women. So this is a global thing. So I just wanted to talk about my organization and how disgusted I am with the way that this poor girl was treated and how late it reached the news, how the media specifically kept it very quiet because they didn't want to create an uproar, another riot, you know.
All right, thank you very much. That's from Highgate Black Women's Wellness Group. Thank you. Can I invite Toyin Ilo, and followed by Isatu, please?
Hi. So just like the last speaker said, there's something that I wanted to bring up, and that is the role of mothers. Yeah. Mothers looking after their children, knowing their children, and being given respect that they know their children. And when the school, and I have to tell you, I've had a lot of experience with schools treat our children like prisoners. They are penalized for your coat's not right, your hair, your comb, everything about their Blackness, the Afro hair, the Afro comb. So it's like we are criminalizing children, and from little things like that you get expelled. When you get expelled, then you're not in school. When you're not in school, then you're not learning. When you're not learning, then how do you progress? So I think education is a big thing. It needs to change. We need to stop treating our children like adults, and school does a lot. And they will tell me, oh, he's 6 foot and big. Oh, I didn't know he was still in school. That's not happening. I actually had someone say to me, oh, you know, the little children, they need hugs and cuddles. But, you know, Black children need strictness. And I'm like, how dare you? My child needs hug and cuddle when they're upset. They don't need discipline. So if you can do it for one child, you can do it for all children. So I think the schools have too much power to tell us about our children when we know our children best. So we have to start, and we have to educate them about their rights, you know? So hopefully things like this won't happen again. It's very scary. When I heard that, I was just like a young girl starting not confident about your body and all of that. The exposure, the trauma is unbelievable. And I think they shouldn't be allowed to get away with this. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Asatu, you're next. Could you unmute?
Can you hear me now?
Can do.
Hello. I have a problem that has gone on for over 10 years. In 2012, the police came to my home and removed my daughter. They told me that they're looking for my daughter. They said the local council told them to come and remove my daughter. And then when I asked them why, they said I should ask the local council. So what happened is they went with my daughter, and then my daughter was crying. She didn't want to go. They pushed her on the floor. They handcuffed her. She was in a school uniform. She was handcuffed. And then they took her away. And then what they did again, they arrested me and put me in a cell. I did nothing. And then the police said to me that some of us took this job for people like you. I'll never forget that. And then, so what happened? They called the council, and then they took me away to the police station. So what happened from that day when they took my daughter, they told me that I should go to the hospital. They put my daughter there. So another social worker came to my house in the morning, and then they said they were saying to me that the police has taken my daughter to the hospital. Then I said to this lady, a black lady, I said to her, I said, but why? And then she said she doesn't know, but she's investigating. So after some time, the lady came back to me and said to me that my daughter should return. She has done a network check. My daughter should come home. And then this other social worker, they took me to court. We were in court for over a year. And then they said I should agree with them for them to keep my daughter. I refused. One day my daughter came to me. There was cut on both her hands. There was cut on both her hands. She was raped. She was starved where they kept her. They did not allow her to go to school for 2 or 3 years. I can't remember. They did allow all of us to see her. But this black social worker that was involved with us, I cannot find her up to now. I'm still looking for her. I cannot find her. So what they did from Essex, they took my daughter to Manchester. That's where my daughter is now. And then what they did again, because I asked my daughter if they have told her why they kept her, they took her away. She said she doesn't know. They never said to her anything up to now. But my daughter is now 23. So all what I've got from the police, is death threats. They are online. If I go online, they are there. They threaten me. If I go on Facebook, they're there. Because we went to court for over a year, and then the Guardian came to me and said to me that I should agree with them to keep my daughter. And then I said, why? And then she said, oh, Mrs. Kibble, it's not because of you. It's not because of you. Please allow us to keep your daughter. I refused. So when I refused, I went on Facebook. They had there like celebrities photos. That's what they put there. They were all racial abuse, all kind of abusive words I received from those people. And now what they are doing, because if they do anything to me in public, then I will have evidence. Now what they're doing, they're making me hearing whatever they're saying, all the abuse. I can hear them, but I'm not seeing anybody, but I can hear all the abuse. At first, I thought maybe it's a mental health problem when it started. So I went to my GP and I explained to my GP. My GP put me on medication. But because they call it voices, but when they become very personal, that's when I realized that it's them that are doing it.
Sorry, Istu. Sorry, could we, I'm going to put an email address for our office in the chat to you. Would it be possible if you just drop me back an email so that I can get more details and see how we can best support you, and we can disseminate that to everybody who's asking, because I can see that everybody is incredibly shocked and harrowed by what you've experienced. Okay, can we call Elder? Is Elder on the call?
Yes, I'm here. Okay. Hello?
Hiya, we can hear you.
Not working.
Hi, Elder, we can hear you. Can you hear me? Hi, sorry, I don't know what's happened there, but I think we might be running well out of time now. I'm going to call back Wayman Bennett from Stand Up to Racism for some closing remarks.
Sure, we have Diane.
I just want to thank everybody for being on this call. I just want to remind people about the conference, but also please contact us. You obviously we want people to be around Stand Up to Racism, but I don't care what organisation you're in. All the organisations have to come together to organise a conference and to organise justice for child Q, and we'll facilitate as many meetings locally and nationally as possible. So please, could you do that, because we want real outcomes to this. And I'll stop there and let Diane give us the last leadership in terms of that. Thank you so much.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Well, we've had some fantastic speakers actually this evening, and everybody has come from their personal experience and their campaigning knowledge. As people have said, the time for talking is over. We want action. This is our moment to actually take the battle against institutional racism forward. We will be getting back in touch with all of you to tell you what we're planning and what we're doing. But in terms of really standing up to institutional racism in the society, whether it's policing, whether it's education, the question is, if not now, when? And if not us, who? Thank you very much all for coming, and I expect to see many of you in the months to come. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Diane. I would like to see if Wayman has perhaps any concluding comments, or Wayman, whether you've done. Can I thank everyone? This has been a fantastic meeting. We've had over 350 people on this call, and I think I look forward to us all coming together to respond to the call that's been put out by both Wayman and Diane. So thank you very much, and good night, everybody, and thank you very much for all your questions and your comments.
Sorry, Moira, just one more thing. Isatu, who was speaking a couple of speakers ago, I have sent you a private message for an email address. If you could please send us an email there with your case. Thank you so much, Isatu, and thank you to everybody that spoke today.
In solidarity with the family of Child Q and for Child Q. Thank you.